A new report from the Anti-Defamation League found that there were more incidents of white supremacist propaganda across the country last year than ever before. According to the ADL, there were over 5,100 cases of racist, anti-Semitic, and hateful messages reported in 2020. That is nearly double the year before, which saw just under 3,000 reported incidents. And on average, about 14 incidents were reported every day. This marks the highest number of white supremacist propaganda incidents that the ADL has ever recorded. Joining me right now is the CEO and National Director of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt. Thank you for coming in, Jonathan. I saw this report. It is so saddening, though not surprising. And I'm wondering from this, are existing hate groups more emboldened? Are there more of them? Is it a combination of both? Tell me what you found.
Well, it's a great question. I appreciate you giving me the chance to be here today to share what we've seen. And as you sort of alluded to, ADL, we're the oldest anti-hate group in the world. And yet what we've seen in the past year is unlike anything we've ever tracked before. So indeed, we saw at least 30 different hate groups spreading thousands of messages. And I'm talking about offline activities, pamphleting, leafleting, flyering, dropping banners, flash mobs, demonstrations, you name it. This happened all over the country in 49 states. The only one that was exempt was Hawaii. And we have indeed seen not only this surge over the past year, but it fits into this bigger pattern, which gets to your question. These white supremacists, they don't just feel, if you will, emboldened in this environment. I would say they feel energized because you had elected officials at the highest levels repeating their rhetoric, right? Spreading around their scapegoats and stereotypes. It was unmistakable. There's never been a moment before in our nation's history where you had the President of the United States, when given the opportunity, told a white supremacist group to, quote, stand back and stand by in a presidential debate. And you had other aides, orbiting around the Oval Office who were repeating these things. So we should not be surprised that across the board, these groups exploited the moment, and they leveraged the pandemic and the fear that it caused, the presidential election and the way the candidate tried to discredit our democracy, and they flooded into that vacuum to spread their toxins.
Jonathan, I think we need to name him. I mean, we've seen Donald Trump since he had taken office and throughout his term, his refusal to speak against white supremacy, his dog whistles, his bullhorns appealing to these hate groups, where he would either ignore or feign ignorance when called out. Is he the main reason behind this jump?
I think it's fair to say that hate existed, before Donald Trump, and it will persist after Donald Trump. White supremacy wasn't only a problem on his watch, but it is unmistakable that the willingness of this White House to credential white supremacist media to cover events, right? Again, for him to tweet out their messages from the presidential social media feed. And on top of that, the relentless demonization of his opponents, the discrediting of institutions, the delegitimizing of our democracy and its core processes, these all fed into an environment where, again, these people felt energized. And, we're still, I would say, sifting through the rubble of the wreckage of his remarks and his rhetoric, because right now we're dealing with this surge of anti-AAPI hate.
I wanted to ask you about that.
The demonization started a year ago, and we're seeing it play out today in horrible and terrifying ways.
I did want to ask you about that. Following the killings in Atlanta, we do not know the motive there yet. They held a press conference earlier, just moments ago, and said that it is too early to say what it is. Regardless, we do know that the fear in the Asian American community is very real, facing hate speech and violence, especially since the pandemic began. What are you seeing here?
I think you're absolutely correct. We don't know, as you said, the shooter's motives. And yet, let's acknowledge the Asian American and Pacific Islander community has been terrorized over the past year plus, since the president started talking about the Wuhan flu. And unlike past presidents from the Republican and Democratic side, right, instead of saying we recognize our Asian American Pacific Islander citizens, right, we're all part of one American family, there was none of that. There was only divisiveness, right? And why that's important today in this moment is, according to Stop AAPI Hate, there have been 3,800 incidents of anti-Asian racism, harassment, vandalism, and violence over the past year. And groups like Asian Americans Advancing Justice are dealing with the impacts on the ground through their chapters across the country. So whether or not this shooter intended, the effect is still the same. There's anxiety and fear in that community. And look, I'm a white Jewish American, and I still stand with our Asian American brothers and sisters because we're all in this together. An attack against them is an attack against me.
Jonathan, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.